The talent and determination of your people that is making Ukraine actually a world leader in humanitarian response.
Did you find something new in Ukraine?
A civil society in Ukraine that will learn fast and work fast. There's a question of Ukrainian national sovereignty under threat in this war from Russia, and there's a question of humanitarian sovereignty. Nobody becomes expert in their understanding of Ukraine, and Ukrainians are spending their whole time explaining Ukraine again and again and again.
Hello, I'm Alexey Zakharov, and today we're joined by H'юго Слім, a leading expert on humanitarianism and international law. H'юgo has dedicated his career to understanding the complex challenges faced by civilians in war zones and the humanitarian workers who support them. His research has been instrumental in shaping of understanding of the evolving nature of conflict and the ethical dilemmas faced by humanitarian actors. Glad to welcome you here. And let's start from our first question. How is Ukraine managing one of the largest humanitarian crises globally? And what are the key lessons learned?
Alexei, thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me on this podcast. So, I am not an expert on Ukraine, but I have learned one big thing in the first few days that I have been here with the Ukrainian Red Cross. It is the talent and determination of your people that is making Ukraine actually a world leader in humanitarian response. So this combination of a very effective, determined, strategic government working in emergency response, and the extraordinary creation of local humanitarian organizations, of which, the Ukrainian Red Cross is one of them, Caritas would be another, and several local ones around the country, and they have really expanded in the war to become really significant, major, and effective humanitarian organizations.
You got many works about humanitarian, about wars. Did you find something new about in Ukraine for you as a researcher?
So, in terms of war, I think what I found really is this, in my generation of war, is a big war. It's not a big government fighting a counterinsurgency group or two armed groups fighting each other. It is a big war between two states with big armies, one bigger than the other, but in a way, one cleverer than the other. And so it's been big battles across big front lines involving many, hundreds of thousands of troops and big technology, some of the most modern technology in terms of drones, rockets, intelligence capability. And I think one of the other striking things, civilians have suffered terribly in this war through displacement, through constant bombardment of cities. But what is interesting in this and terrible in this war as well is the amount of military casualties. So the very large numbers of combatant soldiers who have been killed, wounded, fighting at the front line. For Ukraine, you face the tragic loss of many young men and some quite old men, up to 60, who have bravely fought at the front line. And you will be left with a major problem of veterans, soldiers coming back to ordinary life. So I think it's the scale, the size, the modern technology of this war that is different to many wars that I have studied in African civil wars or even some of the Middle East wars. Tragically, some of the tactics that Russia pioneered in Syria in its very brutal alliance with Assad and its bombardment of Syria, those tactics of bombarding civilian cities, etc., has continued here.
Mm-hmm. What role has civil society played in supporting Ukraine's humanitarian response?
So, a very important one, in other words. So, and I mean civil society across the world as well, because Ukrainian civil society has led, it has shown that it's capable, all sorts of small local organizations, national organizations like Caritas, Ukrainian Red Cross, the Alliance of Civil Society Organizations. This level of organization capability has attracted enormous support from international civil society. So one of the reasons Ukrainian humanitarian response is so successful is that it has attracted so many strong partnerships. In the Red Cross movement, that's European, American, Canadian, all sorts of national societies as well have come and helped here. Because they can and because they know that they are dealing with a civil society in Ukraine that will learn fast and work fast and have results. So it's been a global civil society effort, partnering, investing money, sharing skills, offering solidarity and support.
But global society, they can't work here straight.
So what's been interesting about, I think, listening to some people, I think a lot of international humanitarian aid has become accustomed to working in contexts of less developed countries in Africa, in Asia, countries that have already experienced 20, 30 years of devastating conflict. So they have a lot of poverty and dispersion and very weak government. I think it's been a bit of a shock for Western, European, American civil society and NGOs to come to Ukraine and find such capable response. So I think there was a mismatch of skills initially between what international agencies had learned across Africa and Asia and places where poverty runs very deep, and then coming to Ukraine and trying to adapt to work with a European society in war.
Why is localization critical in humanitarian action, and how has Ukraine's approach influenced this?
So there's two reasons why localization is important in humanitarian response. The first one is an ethical, political reason that each of us in our society, each government, each citizen, has the right to self-determination, to establish their own country, to have their own institutions, and to develop their own humanitarian capacity as required in self-determination. So if you like, there's a question of Ukrainian national sovereignty under threat in this war from Russia, and there's a question of humanitarian sovereignty, that Ukraine should be permitted and respected for running its own sovereign humanitarian response. So that's the political reason and the moral reason why it's important. Operationally, it's important because first you get better response from people who know the situation, who are on the ground, who have relationships with people, who understand the society. It can move fast within their own society to deliver aid, to understand need, to build networks of support. And the second reason is it's better value for money. You don't have big agencies taking 10% of all the money and paying big salaries for their staff. And one of the other problems I've heard here is this endless problem of international staff rotation. So people come in for 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, then they change, then they change. Nobody becomes expert in their understanding of Ukraine. And Ukrainians are spending their whole time explaining Ukraine again and again and again to outsiders. So those are really the main reasons why localization is politically and ethically right and operational common sense.
You partly name it, but what are the key obstacles to fully implementing localization in other global crises?
So in other global crises, I think what's good about this, it's really important, the Ukrainian response, because it has answered the question of localization. Is it possible? And the answer the Ukrainians have given is yes, it is. But whether that's, equally possible in other parts of the world where government structures, civil society structures are weak, in many countries, civil society structures are suppressed by authoritarian regimes, by others. Some are facing real corruption issues. So those environments can be more difficult for localization. And there are also bad habits in the international system. People are part of big institutions. They've made their careers there. Their identity is there. Their salary is there. Their pension is there. In the UN, their children's school fees are paid from there. So there are big vested interests in maintaining international aid as well. But it's also important that international institutions exist because we need UN institutions, big international Red Cross institutions, which carry the values we care about. So we need a big institution that represents the importance of refugees, asylum, safe spaces for persecuted people. We need that institution. We need the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, to stand up and show that, there are rules in war, there must be humanity in war, and it should argue with states and discuss with states and hold that value in multilateralism. The same with UNICEF and children, WFP and food. So we need international institutions, but probably more as investors and advocates and norm setters than day-to-day operational agencies.
How do you think Ukraine's localization efforts can inform international humanitarian practices?
So, as I said, I think the Ukrainians have set a good example to the world of localization. And in many societies, they will now be able to show that example and say, look, in Ukraine, you did this. In Ukraine, the Ukrainians did this. Let us try this now. So in certain societies, that will be a convincing argument for other people in civil society, in the Red Cross movement and others. So I think it will help. And I think there may be a case in the future for Ukrainians to give advice, to partner with people and help them find confidence, find systems. I mean, one of the things I've heard so much this week is that in some ways, COVID was an advantage because in COVID, Ukrainian institutions began to put in systems of national response that they could then surge in the war. So COVID prepared Ukrainian civil society a little. And I think, that example, that experience can be shared with other countries.
Mm-hmm. How can international humanitarian community adapt its practices based on Ukraine's experiences?
So I think it will be useful if Ukrainian civil society gives the international humanitarian society a list of 10 good things to change in their practice. I think some of that will be about rotations, investing in international staff to work as partners along a long time, not in and out all the time, things like that. I think also on the list will be don't help us deliver the aid, help us invest and build the systems we need, the financial systems, the digital systems, the human resources systems, the fundraising system. Help us develop the systems that we need to work. I think that's a big key. Don't do everything with us. And then I think there are certain skills and attitudes when you come to be a partner organization, which are more about strategic patience, more about working beside someone, not on top of them. And those attitude skills should be understood by internationals. Many people have them, but not all of them. And I think above all, Western agencies, international agencies should learn to be good partners. And it was very interesting being with a group of the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement last night at a dinner, and the Ukrainian Red Cross saying, no, you're not partners, you're now friends. So I think actually when you can move from partnership to the friend of an organization, that's even better.
It's working more from the deep of hearts,
From hearts and
from hearts.
And yeah, a common idea of shared objectives, shared relationships, and sustainable relationships. Yeah.
Other risks in adopting Ukraine's approaches internationally.
Other risks? Well, if you stay any more than 24 hours in Ukraine, some Ukrainian will tell you that Ukraine is different to everywhere else. Okay, it's unique. So it's not going to be a direct, copy and paste for another country. And the Ukrainians will need to become good partners too, because they can't go to other countries and say, do exactly what we did in Ukraine. That's not going to work. So they have to think of the principles, the systems, and work in a different way. So, yeah, it won't be exactly like Ukraine in other places, as we said earlier.
I got next question. How can humanitarian organizations balance their commitment to neutrality with the complex realities of modern warfare?
So, neutrality has been a big question in Ukraine, and I understand that. My view is that you do not have to be neutral to be a good humanitarian. You don't have to lie in your heart and pretend you don't care that your country has been invaded by an enemy. Of course you're not neutral about that if you are a Ukrainian humanitarian. So you don't need to be neutral, but you do need to be humanitarian. And you do need to work on who needs your help, whoever they are. So I don't think neutrality of humanitarian agencies is so important. Some people do. I don't. I think the principle of humanity is important. Certainly if somebody invaded Britain and I was working for the British Red Cross, I would not be neutral. I would be upset if they were killing my people, if they were bombing my cities. I would have a very strong political view against them. I hope they will lose and I hope they will leave. But I can still be a very good humanitarian. I can, in my heart I can have the British flag and the Red Cross emblem at the same time. That is not a problem for me in this situation. And I would expect, if my enemy was wounded, the humanitarian part of me would help that enemy.
Yeah, no, it's important part.
Yeah.
From your research on the ethics of war, what are the key considerations humanitarian actors must prioritize to protect civilians efficiently?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, I've been very lucky. The few days I've spent in your country, your government has protected me. Your government has protected me as a civilian because it issues air raid warnings. It has made sure that people have air raid shelters. So your government has protected me as a civilian while I have been in Kyiv. And that is fantastic. And that is the first responsibility of a government. So international agencies, humanitarian agencies should help governments meet their responsibility to protect civilians in the way that happens here. So, that's one thing. And then there are lots of techniques, efficient distribution of cash, food, things refugees, displaced people need, things that families need, information about where is dangerous, where is not dangerous, family links, the ability to flee the country if necessary. These things must be in place.
Yeah. That's all questions what we have. Thank you very much. Really, thank you.
It's a pleasure. No, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.